Second.
Good afternoon. We're now starting a House Economic Matters Committee briefing. Today we're talking about discussion of racial bias in home appraisals. I believe the first people we have a panel from the Maryland Department of Labor, Greg Morgan and Todd Blackenstone. You guys here? And I would ask yourself, if you're not actually talking or been announced on a panel, I ask you to mute yourself, please. Is Greg Morgan here?
Yes, I am here.
Outstanding. And Mr. Todd Blackenstone?
Todd is here as well.
Okay, if you guys would like to begin the briefing, we're ready when you guys are.
All right, and we have a PowerPoint to accompany it. So whoever controls it at your level, I'll just ask to advance the slides as we go through.
One brief second, sir. Let us get them pulled up.
Okay.
Kayla, are we almost good?
Yes, give me 1 second. The document went away, so I'm pulling it back up.
No worries. I think you guys can start when she'll get the briefing. She'll get it going as we flow through if you guys want to, so we don't have to burn up everyone's time.
Sure, thanks, Delegate Wilson, and I guess Chairman Davis and Vice Chair Crosby aren't here today, but I'd like to thank all the esteemed members of this committee. My name is Greg Morgan. I serve the citizens of Maryland as Commissioner of the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing within the Maryland Department of Labor. Our division comprises 21 appointed boards and commissions as set forth by statute, and we manage the license and regulatory compliance of over 255,000 licensees within 25 occupational and professional licensing categories. Joining me today is Todd Blackenstone, who serves as Executive Director of Maryland Commission of Real Estate Appraisers, Appraisal Management Companies, and Home Inspectors. Hereinafter, we will refer to as the Commission. The Commission currently licenses 2,096 home appraisers and 1,306 home inspectors. The Commission has 15 appointed members and is compliant with statutory requirements regarding industry, consumer, and financial institution representation on the Commission. We appreciate the opportunity to present today and outline how the Commission serves the citizens of Maryland and how the Commission can serve to investigate complaints such as those acknowledged in recent media reports to ensure national standards are being upheld. All right, let me just slide. Okay, so the Commission licenses and regulates individuals who perform real estate appraisal services in connection with federally related transactions. And as mentioned, I'm just going to try to slide my screen a second. All right, so. The Commission licenses and regulates individuals who perform real estate. The Commission is made up of 15 members. If we could go to the next slide. The Commission is proud to protect the public, and we ensure professional competency of its licensees through fair and consistent enforcement of the federal and state statutes and regulations. The Appraisal Foundation of America creates what's called USPAP. It's Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices, and they're mandated. And they're the mandated ethical and performance standards for the appraisal profession in the United States. And USPAP states that appraisers must not perform with bias, especially with unsupported conclusions about one's race, color, religion, national origin, gender, age, income, handicap, marital status, or familial status. We can go to the next slide, please. The complaint process, so anyone can file a complaint. You don't even have to be engaged in the process. You can file a complaint with our commission and against a certified appraiser or a licensed home inspector. Once a complaint is received, it's vetted for the basic requirements and then sent to the licensee per COMAR, and they have 30 days to respond. If we could go to slide 5, please. The commission has a designated complaint committee that will review the complaint and licensee response along with the Attorney General counsel to the commission. The commission may choose to dismiss a case, attempt to resolve the case informally before charges are issued or issue charges depending on the merits of the case. Next slide, please. Slide 6. Under the law, charges can be issued against the appraiser or home inspector for such things as dishonest or fraudulent acts in providing real estate appraisal services, fraudulently or deceptively using a license, engaging in contact that demonstrates bad faith, incompetency, negligence, or untrustworthiness, or violating the commission's regulations that include ethical standards and practices. Can you go to the next slide? Slide 7. Oh, we skipped a slide. There we go. So we have several resources for the constituents of Maryland. Again, we're here to serve the public. We are a complaint-driven organization, and folks can go on the website and pull up and follow through on filing a complaint, and kind of shows you the illustration to the right on the slide shows how property value is determined. And again, all of this is through the regulations and standards set forth by USPAP. So at this point in time, Director Blackistone and I are here to answer any questions, and we can go ahead and get rid of the slide presentation if we would.
Does anyone have any questions for either of the presenters?
I do.
All right, briefly, please, if you can use the hand raising function so I know and can keep track. The first hand I see, I apologize. I see Mr. Marvin Holmes, Delegate Holmes, would you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if you might be able to let us know how the Dodd-Frank Act assigns appraisers. What does the Dodd-Frank Act do to make appraisers go to a certain area? How does that affect us?
So the Dodd-Frank Act, which led to the establishment of the foundation, the appraisal foundation, and the law set forth, determined that any federally backed or home transaction requires an appraisal. And the appraisal foundation was established in 1989 to create the standards for the appraisal process.
Now, if I may, Mr. Chair, so that establishes the standards, but does Dodd-Frank also establish how the appraisers are assigned to specific properties for the appraisal process through the banking system?
I do not know the specific answer to that question, but we can certainly research that and get back to you with that answer.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is Delegate Arndt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A real quick question, based on the subject matter we're reviewing today, is how many complaints have you had regarding this particular issue?
Throughout the state of Maryland, specific jurisdictions?
Correct. Well, not this specific jurisdiction, for this type of problem.
So again, I'd like to research that if I could and get back to you with that answer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could add on to that, sir, I would also be interested in the number of complaints, and specifically in the minority majority areas or areas such as Prince George's, Charles, and Arundel with a larger minority population. It would be nice to get those broken down by county. is to see, the number of complaints, obviously where the hot spots are for these issues. We also have Delegate J Walker.
Thank you. Just going back to that last slide that you showed where they listed all the things like age of a property, it talked about improvements. It seemed like a lot of stuff was subjective. Do most of the complaints come with the subjective portion of it? Like how are you gonna determine what's a good neighborhood? What's a good location? What is good? What do y'all do to address the stuff that's subjective with the different appraisers? Particularly if they're coming from, say, an outside entity. They could come across from Virginia, like I know in Prince George County where I live, a lot of the appraisers come from Virginia, they come from different states. What do y'all do to monitor that subjectivity?
Again, we're driven by complaints. So obviously, if we receive a complaint regarding a specific appraiser or appraisal management company, we will investigate that specific complaint. And if it's, they feel that the person doesn't know the area or whatever, we would investigate and make sure they were, qualified and met the standards as set forth by USPAP.
Now I'm assuming we're here having this hearing because there have been some complaints regarding that. I've heard some of it, in my jurisdiction. We don't have those numbers available.
So as far as complaints, I can tell you our commission has not had a large influx of complaints. So it has to come through our commission for us to monitor it. If you want to reference the story on WUSA 9 recently that I think brought this to the attention of a lot of folks, the two folks they featured actually didn't file a complaint with our commission. So it's hard for us to investigate or assist if we're not getting the complaints. But so this is great that we're talking about it, because as your constituents reach out, you can direct them to our agency, and we're glad to assist anybody with any such complaints on this topic.
All right. Next in line is Delegate Learman.
Thank you, Delegate. Greg, I just wondered if you were aware or have been contacted by the Department of Housing and Community Development, because last year the General Assembly passed legislation HB 1239 that the Realtors note in their testimony. Senator Hayes and I passed this bill, and it requires an appraisal study on racial discrimination in real estate. The language is that for the purpose of determining whether there's been discrimination on the basis of race in community investments, real estate financing, or real estate appraisals. And DHCD is doing this disparity study. And so I wondered if they had reached out to you at all, which seems like it would make sense to hear of complaints or if you're working with them.
So they're actually, I believe, scheduled to present today. I'm not aware that they've reached out to our commission. But I'll defer to Director Blackistone if you can just.
They have not.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I would certainly suggest reaching out to them, and I'll certainly let them know that, it seems it's a pretty big oversight to have not reached out. Thank you.
Sure.
Next, we have Delegate Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once you receive the complaint, then it's investigated. And when you do your findings, what happens next?
So there's several levels of, it can be kind of an unofficial reprimand, which means it wouldn't go against the person's, well, first of all, you investigate it. There's a complaint review that goes on, and then if it's determined that it has merit, then it goes into the investigatory stage. And then if it comes back that it has credibility, we find that there was a violation, then there's several actions that can happen. I'm going to actually defer to Director Blackistone. You just got a promotion. Director Blackistone to answer with a little more detail.
Yes, hi. So once a complaint goes through the complaint committee and they find out that, let's say there was a USPAP violation, there could be a number of things that could happen. It could be a fine, a reprimand, a revocation of the license if it was extremely egregious, suspension, or it could be a non-formal type of disciplinary action, such as remedial education, for example. If it was a very minor offense, for example, the complaint committee just gave someone 30 hours of remedial education. So there's a multitude of things that could happen. As far as a disciplinary action, if that's what you were asking.
And that complaint committee is with the commission? Is that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's made up of appraiser members of the commission as well as council.
Okay.
And just to follow up on that, are those complaints and any remedial action, are those made public and kept record, or for
Yes.
later viewing per
Yes,
individual complaint?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are made public. Anything with a fine, a reprimand, suspension, revocation, they're all made public on our state website, of course. And we're also mandated to report them to the appraisal subcommittee, which is under the Appraisal Foundation.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
they're with them as well. You're welcome, sir.
Delegate Fennell, are you done? Thank you. Delegate Chi?
Mr. Morgan, earlier in your statement, you mentioned your office is complaints driven. I wonder if it has always been the case, because my concern is if your office is complaints driven, then I know a lot of communities are not gonna be able to even understand the system to file complaints. And there will be a lot of reporting, so to speak, of foul play or whatever. And also, do you have a system of your office periodically or regularly collecting data to evaluate some patterns and see some red flags of undervaluation of certain markets or so forth? I would assume there has to be some kind of system in place rather than depending on people taking upon themselves to know how to file complaints, right?
Again, it's based on the complaints that we receive, and our commission will review, a certain abundance of complaints in a certain particular area. So if it were to be, racial bias, then the commission would speak to it and address it, and they, may address it at a level to discuss with our legal advisors as to any change in the statute. But again, we follow the guidelines of USPAP. Now we can expand beyond, but we can't lower that. And as far as, doing studies, it's just not, how we're set up or how we're structured by statute. But these are great conversations, and again, we'll gladly work with you in any way we can improve how we serve the citizens of Maryland.
Delegate Charkoudian?
Thank you. I think my question is sort of along the same lines of Delegate Cheese and possibly Delegate Learman's. The concern that I have with a complaint-driven process is that it requires two things. One is that the individual knows to file the complaint. And so if you have sort of bias and discrimination happening and someone's feeling sort of disconnected to the broader structures, then they may also feel less like that they could file that complaint. But the other issue is if we're talking about sort of patterns and practices of bias, it's hard to know if you're in a neighborhood that has had bias against it, then your home sort of ends up looking comparable to other homes that have bias against it. And it sort of becomes, it seems, a self-fulfilling kind of a prophecy. And so I'm just trying to understand how a complaint-driven process could potentially address that, and what other things can your office do that can ensure removal of that kind of bias, and what are the other trainings that are done, and what kinds of reviews are done of people's practice? What's the training that prepares people for the license that could And maybe the continuing education, like where are the other levers to address some of these issues, especially if once Delegate Learman's bill sort of comes to fruition, if we find those patterns, like where are the levers that the regulatory agencies can kind of incorporate that into practice?
Sure, great question. I appreciate given opportunity. And I know the issue is the complaint-driven aspect of it. But again, we operate under the guidance of the Appraisal Foundation. It's of the 25 licensing categories we have, it's the only one that has federal oversight. And I can tell you that the Appraisal Foundation inside their website has a section dedicated to promoting diversity in the appraisal profession, both as it relates to how appraisers address that, and then also addressing diversity in the Appraisal Foundation and trying to grow opportunities across the board for everyone in the appraisal profession. And it is a conversation, and we're aware of it. But again, in our commission, we just haven't seen the amount of complaints that you would think based on this conversation. But again, we'll be a part of anything if the bill passes, and Delegate Learman, I will reach out to the folks at the Department of Housing and Community Development and work together with them.
Yeah, I think the bill already passed, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Howard.
So, Mr. Morgan, these complaints are overseen by a board or a commission appointed by the Attorney General?
No, it's the commission is appointed by the governor. This is one of the 21 boards and commissions that go through the appointment process through the Secretary of Labor to the Governor of Maryland.
Okay. And you'll get back to us with information, because I'm very interested in the percentages of complaints versus the amount of appraisals that we're doing.
We don't have the amount of appraisals because we don't get that amount. We can tell you how many complaints we get, and we can do it based on, compare it to the number of appraisers we license, but we don't monitor how many appraisals are done in the state of Maryland or in any jurisdiction.
Well,
that's all done through the, I'm sure we can find that somewhere, and we will work with our partners to find that.
You thinking like MLS? Because every home sale, I would imagine, has to have an appraisal. So we could just do it based on home sales. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah,
refinances as well.
Refinances as well. That's absolutely correct.
I'm sure it exists out there somewhere, and we will search to find that information.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Delegate Arntz, another bite at the apple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I kind of got taken off when we didn't have any complaints, but I understand there are complaints. Now, based on your comments, I'm a realtor, so when I go out there and I'm working with a customer, and I'm not talking about refinancing, I'm talking about just going out financing, and I come back and that house is not appraising for what I think it should appraise, I would encourage my buyer to contest that appraisal. And it is my understanding that banks, typically we go through banks or lending institutions that have relationships within those communities. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, so they have those relationships. And what you're saying is we still find that problem where people understand that there could be a problem and they're not addressing that problem at that level. These people are typically familiar with the area and familiar with the types of appraisals. And I would think, doing my due diligence as an agent or somebody trying to accommodate, because it's in our best interest. I have a fiduciary responsibility to that buyer. And I guess I'm confused that there's a lack of complaints, or we don't have a real grip on the number of complaints and specifically, I think we're talking about Prince George's today. So can you help me with some of that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. If you just,
I'm sorry. The question is pretty simple. I have an agent that's working with me. I have a lending officer that's working with me. I have everybody that's vested in this this product moving forward. Even if you're refinancing, I have a lender who's interested in getting me that money. He makes his money on those dollars. So it would be in everybody's best interest to get you the biggest, highest appraisal if you're trying to buy something. And I'm wondering how this has become a problem when everybody's focus is at least their fiduciary responsibilities to that borrower.
Well, the responsibility is, I mean, the appraisal, the hiring of an appraiser comes from the lending institution, the bank, the mortgage company, whoever's lending the money. They want to protect their interests and make sure that the home is going to appraise at a value higher than the risk that they're undertaking with the loan and whatever the percentage of the loan to the sale price of the house. And so they're the ones that actually hire the appraisers, and whether they go direct or go to an appraisal management company is how they work. And again, part of it is some of the complaints that could exist would be the appraiser is not familiar with the areas from out of state. And I think that was referenced in a previous question. So those are conversations that should happen with the borrower and their lending institution. And Director Blackistone, do you want to add anything to that? You're on
yeah, a couple. Through or sign up for the management company. These are hired by the bank. So the banks typically, Mr. Morgan said, the commissioner just said, they're the ones that send out that appraiser. It's not, they are usually tied to that area, because they accept that appraisal knowing, they're not going to send an appraisal from Cumberland, appraiser from Cumberland to go to Ocean City, for example. They would never accept it. Other training, I believe also, and there is, to get your appraisal license, there is USPAP training required, and it's also required every 2 years as a follow-up forever.
Okay, I guess my problem with this whole process as you're describing it is that let's say I am an appraiser. I get paid on the appraisals I do. The bank is hopefully wanting to lend everybody money, all the money they can lend out, because that's how they make their money. Where is the suspected problem coming from then? Because everybody seems to have the best interest of the borrower.
And Steve, I just want to jump in because obviously we've dealt with these complaints in the past in different parts of the country. One has to do with basically the banks do benefit from a lower appraisal as well, because there's less risk if they hire or tend to go for appraisers that go in certain areas and appraise lower than the actual value of the home. This has been the complaints that we've read about in the papers. So part of the issue is the banks dealing with a certain number of appraisers who they know will give a much lower value than what the homes are actually worth. Therefore, their risk is even less. Okay. And again, I don't want to keep beating the horse, guys, because I know we have a long way to go.
Right. I got a lot of questions, but I agree with you. I understand your point. I'm just trying to find out where.
And we're not trying to point, and I understand your fiduciary duty, but as you've heard stated, that's not really, the appraiser is not really your duty. You do have not obligation, but I guess a duty to inform them if you feel that should go higher. But a lot of people don't know that, or they don't do that. They're just trying to get the sale done and over with because they deal in value, not quality. And that's the other complaints we've been getting is about the individuals rushing the sales, rushing the appraisal, just getting it through. And that's why we're here today, just to briefly hear from all these different organizations. We don't yet have a bill. We just I wanted to let you know what the complaint was as I've read, researched, and understood it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Delegate Ampray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Morgan, thank you for joining us today. My question goes more so to the post-complaint process. So I've looked online here at some of the people who have been penalized after a complaint. And what I'm noticing is individuals, and there's never like a management company or institution that's being analyzed. So whenever a complaint comes through, is there any process that once you see that something malicious has happened, is there any review of that company, their training procedures and so forth? Because, I believe that this is definitely an individual, this is a human error process or human bias process, but a lot of our human errors and human biases are informed by the institutions that we work for or how we're trained. So just want to get an idea of, after a complaint is made, if someone is found to be racially biased, is there any further investigation into the company or training that person received that is automatically triggered? Because I think that that's a concern that I have, is ensuring that we're not, we're ensuring that we're not creating a system that has the biases that we're seeing.
I can defer to Director Blackistone on that, and he can answer that question for me. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the trouble is, this is from what our council is saying. It's very tough to determine if the violation that was committed, if a USPAP violation was committed, if it was committed due to a racial bias, or because that appraiser is just a bad appraiser, or if they made a mistake or had a bad day. You know what I mean? That's the trouble, is it's very difficult for our council to determine what's going on if it was a racial bias issue. It's from what we're told, it's almost impossible. And the other issue is, going back to the complaints, all we can do as a commission is discipline the appraiser if they are in violation. We can't force them or mandate them to, and this might go back to Delegate Arntz's question. We can't mandate that they change the appraisal, amend it. We can't have them do anything. All we can do is discipline them if we do find that they are in violation. And that might be a reason why we don't have the number of complaints, because they realize, hey, they can't do anything for me. All they can do is, give that appraiser a fine or something, let's say. But what's that going to do for me, the citizen, which we understand?
But there's no penalty on the appraisal company. So when there is discipline given, and you all were to find, in the hypothetical sense, you are to find that there is bias, there's no upstream discipline, there's no upstream investigation, because I think that we live in a world where we assume it's just bad apples, but there's often a root cause, right?
Agree. Yeah,
I'm trying to better understand the process. There's nothing that you all have in place that would require you to do any upstream investigations into the companies and the systems that are putting out appraisers that are not doing a good job.
Yeah, I can answer that. Since I've been here, there hasn't been any complaints that have gone forward that have dealt specifically with any kind of racial bias. So I wouldn't know the answer to that question. That have gone forth to convictions or sanctions or anything along those lines. If a complaint did come in, let's say, and they did determine that it was some kind of racial bias which caused that violation, there would definitely be sanctions involved, and that could be a revocation of a license, which would go way beyond just retraining or anything along those lines. And as far as companies, do you mean a company that an appraiser might work for?
Yeah. So I'm saying that a company the appraiser works for. I don't want to hog too much time. I know we're black, but I just want to get and even outside of racial bias, even outside of that horrific situation where that occurs, any other type of instance where an appraiser is found to be doing something wrong, anything that they're doing right, I just want to know, as part of your disciplinary process, is there any upstream evaluation? And based on what you're telling me, it sounds like there isn't. So I just want to get, and we can discuss this further later, but I just want to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, we only license individuals, not the companies that they might work for. So we can only deal with that individual. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, our hands are tied that way.
Got it. Thank you.
We have one last question from Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. Just for clarification, so an appraiser comes to me as the homeowner, and I make a complaint to the commission. So the complaint then is against the appraiser, but doesn't have anything to do with the value that they've appraised my home for. Is that correct?
You fill out a complaint and you have to identify, the reason for your complaint. And Todd can elaborate a little bit on that. But, as far as if you feel the home was undervalued, that can be part of the complaint. And then it's just a one point. And we have to identify that there was some misconduct on the part of the appraiser that got to that matter. And I'll let Todd, Director Blackistone, elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, could you rephrase the question?
Sure.
I didn't. Thank you.
Sure. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand the purpose of the complaint. So an appraiser, you're the appraiser, you come and appraise my home. I don't believe that you have done a great job. Either you've undervalued, overvalued, whatever. I make a complaint to this commission. The complaint then is against the appraiser, but not so much how they've the value that they've placed on my home. Is that correct?
Well, it's always against the appraiser. That's always going to be the respondent that is being complained against. And if I understand what you're saying correctly, typically, someone can complain about anything, really, usually it is a value issue. Usually it's, I thought my home was worth this, it only appraised for that. And we get a complaint.
So when you get these complaints, then how many are how often is the complainant found correct? Or you don't have any idea?
I don't have that. I'd have to get those statistics for you. I'd be happy to.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now the last question is from our Delegate Brooks. You have to unmute yourself, Delegate Brooks. You have to unmute yourself, brother.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Commissioner, my question has to do with demographics. Yeah, what percent of the 2,096 home appraisers and then the 1,306 home inspectors or African Americans? Yeah.
So that's not information that we record. It's just not part of the application process. We have their address and their name, and but we don't do any racial or gender demographics on the appraisers. That's correct, Director.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, and a follow-up. So really, and in that respect, so you really have nothing to do with the applicants, the people who are applying to be appraisers or inspectors. You only issue the licenses?
Yeah, they go through the application process, have to meet the requirements of USPAP and the requirements of our regulations, and go through the educational and the training requirements set forth. And once they meet that and they fill out the application and we verify all that information, they're licensed. But there's
Okay, and lastly, and Delegate Walker had asked about this when you had, I think it was on your slide deck number 7, where you had the 6 things that goes into the appraisal process. Is there a weighted average applying to anything like location, market, age, condition? What percent would they be equally yoked, or is there some particular line items would carry more weight than the other?
Yeah, there's that I'm aware of, there's no particular, percentage, but basically the appraiser takes all that information into account: the age of the home, the square footage of the home, the size of the property, any improvements to the home, anything like that, and they have to find comparable properties within a certain geographic area that meet those requirements. They have to determine a market value on the home, an appraised value, so that again, that if the home were to have to sell, they could sell for that amount based on the comparables. I mean, that's a word that you hear all the time. It's a comparable.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we're going to move on to our next presentation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and consideration. The next we have Department of Housing and Community Development, Hunter Pickles. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because that is how it's spelled.
You got it.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, sir. You may begin.
Thank you, Delegate Wilson, and I'd like to extend a thanks to the chairman for inviting us to testify, and thank you to the members of the committee. I am Hunter Pickles. I am the Chief Policy Officer for the Department of Housing and Community Development. DHCD is the state's housing finance agency. So last year, we provided approximately $1 billion worth of mortgages to about 4,000 households, largely first-time home buyers, and over half of the borrowers are minority borrowers. We've seen and heard the same stories that have prompted this hearing, and I can understand the family's frustration, and so I'm glad that this conversation is coming out to the forefront. We've been specifically invited here to discuss a study that is underway, the study that was referenced earlier, which is essentially a 30-year retrospective for the purpose of determining whether there's been discrimination on the basis of race in community investments, real estate financing, and real estate appraisals. And as the finance agency, we're not typically involved in this aspect of the industry, but we're happy to engage our research team and partners to conduct this study, and have committed to the speaker to use whatever resources we have available to complete the task. So I think the study so far is in a very early phase, so I don't have much to report. And to this point, we've been evaluating publicly and commercially available data sets and working with researchers and affiliates to determine the methodology for the study. But even at this early stage, there are some data challenges that are associated with the requirement that, as long as we have this venue, I think are worth bringing up. Primarily, there are issues with both the availability of technical data to control for variables and the time frame that all of that data might be available. Because when you're pulling from different data sets, in order to have apples to apples comparisons, you have to have the same data collected over time. So the most comprehensive data set that is out there is most likely the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. That reporting requirement originally went in for banking mortgage lenders in, I think, the 70s. And it's been amended several times over the decades, and that has changed the nature of that reporting. So one of the things to note is that there's a baseline set of data that would come with HMDA that would cover the period that we're talking about, the 30 years. but information on, say, risk analysis factors like debt to income and combined loan to value ratios were only required starting in 2018. Credit score and history and other factors that might go into underwriting still aren't available. So it will be a challenging data set to work from if we can't find other data that's out there. Of course, we're not the only ones having this conversation right now. So, there's a significant public policy interest in it, and regulators and industry groups. I know Department of Labor had mentioned a few minutes ago about the Appraisal Institute is looking at it and has announced a diversity initiative in training up minority appraisers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I know, is very interested in this and is working on some data and hosting events to talk about the issue. And Freddie Mac recently put out some information taking a look at their data. One of the things with the appraisal, because the appraisal is the product of generally the financial institution that requested it, that data is not usually publicly available. But Freddie Mac does have some of that information, and they looked through their portfolio to try to draw some conclusions. Largely their result is that more study is needed. But I think there's a lot of attention being drawn to it. And so I think a lot of that study will occur. I think because it was mentioned earlier too, with reference to the commission as the regulatory and licensing body for appraisers, I think it is also worth mentioning that the Fair Housing Act obviously prohibits discrimination on the basis of, among other things, race. And so if anyone has allegations of discrimination, it's important to report it to HUD's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office and the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. They have the ability to impose fines up to a certain amount. Also, it can be a civil matter. So one could file a civil complaint. With that, I would open it up to any questions you may have.
Seeing no questions, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Pickles. We'll definitely move on, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you later as we kind of design a potential solution for this issue. Next, we have the Maryland Association of Realtors. We have Craig Wolf and Chuck Caskey.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Craig Wolf, the 2022 president of Maryland Realtors, and I'll make a brief statement, and then our association executive, Chuck Caskey, will do so and be happy to take questions. Maryland Realtors appreciates the opportunity to address issues relating to appraisal bias. Expanding housing opportunity is an important goal for the association, and we launched a consumer campaign last year called Open Doors to Stronger Neighborhoods. The website is opendoorsmaryland.org to demonstrate our long-term commitment to these issues. Differences in values between properties is a function of many factors, but it's critical that those factors do not relate to the race or other personal characteristics of the homeowners or residents of a community. Devaluing property due to a person's protected class of status is always wrong. It's important that affected homeowners, realtors, and others know how to identify this and what resources are available to address these inconsistencies. To that end, a realtor's ability to interact with appraisers was significantly changed by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. The federal government limited real estate licensees' ability to influence appraisals due to the concern that some homeowners receiving inflated valuations that contributed to the real estate crash that left many homeowners underwater or worse, facing foreclosure. A blind process is now used to select appraisers, Realtors will occasionally voice concerns about out-of-state appraisers undervaluing properties in communities where they're new to the appraiser. However, because of Frank Dodd limits real estate agents from influencing appraisals, even when a real estate agent has a complaint or concern, the appraiser is under no legal duty to even respond to that agent. While not all the contact and information shared between a real estate licensee and appraisers is prohibited, the federal law can cause confusion and concern for both the appraiser and the real estate agent. Finally, all real estate licensees representing sellers have a legal duty to protect and promote their clients' interest, which includes ensuring their clients receive the best price for their homes. We look forward to engaging with and providing assistance to the General Assembly and the executive branch in examining these issues to ensure real estate valuations are race neutral and that owners, realtors, and others are educated about the appropriate recourse when the valuations appear low. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Wolf? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. Our last presenter is the Prince George's County Association of Realtors, Kenneth Fagan.
I think I had a part in there. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cassie. You can jump.
Okay.
You're looking out.
And I saw Delegate Holmes' hand. I don't know it, but I can't call on him. But I don't know.
And I apologize. And I would ask you guys, if you do have a hand, please use the computer version of putting it up because I might not see your real hand. Again, Delegate Holmes, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very, very briefly, Mr. Wolf did mention, as I did previously, Dodd-Frank. Yeah. And I have been in conversation with Secretary Fudge in an other task force that she is providing. And I think that there might be some necessity to have some of that Dodd-Frank revised, because part of the problem, in my opinion, is that we do have appraisers coming from unfamiliar areas into appraising areas that they have no knowledge of. So I think there needs to be some kind of revision to Dodd-Frank. And I would appreciate if someone would either tell me how I am misguided or give me some additional information, if you would, please.
And I believe either presenter can answer that question, either Mr. Wolf or Mr.
I'll take a crack at it before I read my statement. And the answer, yes, Delegate Holmes, and we've talked about this, and you know this as well as anybody. Maybe Dodd-Frank did it overreach. I mean, clearly they needed to put that wall of separation between the lender and the appraiser, because we know, and you can go back to the Baltimore flipping, back from the 80s when they were using Roland Park comps for Butcher's Hill rehabs. And, so because they were all in cahoots, let's be honest. So creating that separation between the lender and the appraiser was absolutely necessary. Is it possible they overreacted and created a too much of a separation? Yeah, maybe. And you're right. People do come from out of state, and they do come from Southern Pennsylvania and down to appraise Ocean City properties. Yes, that happens. So did they overreact? Maybe. And I think Dodd-Frank is, especially on that one particular issue, could use a new set of eyes. No question. We agree with you on that. But very briefly, and I'll just review and some additional information. Again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having us. Again, I am Chuck Caskey, Maryland Realtors CEO, and we know appraisal bias is real, and we know we need to determine how prevalent it is, and we need to develop a clear path to correct it. But there are numerous efforts underway, some of which have already been discussed to address this. We talked about the HUD initiative. June 1st, President Biden directed HUD Secretary Fudge to lead the first of its kind interagency initiative to address inequity in home appraisals. And Secretary Fudge established the Interagency Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity. The acronym is PAVE, and you search PAVE and you can get a lot of information there. And they're scheduled to deliver a report early next year hopefully to describe the extent, causes, and consequences of undervaluing properties. The task force will also prepare a roadmap of consumer-facing and industry actions and policy, making the most significant changes potentially to the appraisal profession since the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989, back to the S&L crisis. Already from the PAVE homepage, one can click a link to file a complaint with HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. So there's also a federal avenue to filing a complaint as well as with the commission. As was also mentioned by Commissioner Gordon, I think this past September, Freddie Mac study concluded that appraisers' opinions of values are more likely to fall below the contract price in Black and Latino census tracts, and the extent of the gap increases as the percentage of Black or Latino people in the tract increases. And that's one of the metrics that we use, the appraisal price to contract price. It was also mentioned that the Appraisal Institute and International Professional Association representing the appraisal profession is taking steps to root out the problem, including training on unconscious racial bias, updating its professional ethics standards, and to address Delegate Brooks's point from earlier, expanding its diversity initiatives to bring more people of color into the field. We don't need to study, we don't need statistics, Delegate Brooks, to know that minorities are underrepresented by far in this industry, and we need to do a lot more outreach to bring appraisers of color into the industry. We've supplied to you the Illinois Association of Realtors, who recently conducted a study. They did use, as Executive Director Pickles mentioned, the National Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, HMDA, data, and a data scientist from the University of Chicago. There is a lot of manipulation to that data, has to be done, but they did find a very close and demonstrable relationship between a borrower's race and the likelihood that the borrower will receive a residential appraiser lower than the contract price. As also mentioned several times and in our written statement as well, and again by Mr. Pickles, House Bill 1239 and Delegate Lehrman, of course, requires DHCD to study whether there has been discrimination on the basis of race, and we're looking forward to that report by June of next year. There are additional ways also to address appraisal bias, and we're all working on this together. That's the good news. Department of Labor, through the commission, has provided, as is mentioned, a regulatory structure to address complaints. And as always, Maryland Realtors are ready, willing, and able to assist in any ways we can. And we're happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. The first question we have is from Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick question. If somebody files a complaint, this can go to anybody that spoke earlier. Somebody files a complaint, what's the next step, of course? So if I feel my home was undervalued and I file a complaint, does the commission send somebody out there to actually do another appraisal on it, or do they just file the complaint against the appraiser and see if they have any more complaints to follow? What happens there? That's question one.
That would be for the department. But let me just chime in real quick, Delegate Walker, because what you've seen and anecdotally and what's been reported as recently as again today in the Post, there was another case from the San Francisco Bay Area. What happens typically, and the anecdotes that we have, the homeowner who may suspect a racial bias conducts, pardon I'll put this in quotes because it was in the, that's not my word, but they whitewash the house. And this has happened on several occasions. And they go through and they remove the identifying information and the art and the pictures and all, and the appraisers come in one case, almost $500,000 higher. So the second appraisal. And that's why if it works out, the transaction does settle on relatively good terms, those homeowners are gone and they may not file a complaint. So that's one of the reasons we don't necessarily track the problem with the number of complaints.
Sure. from the agency, please?
I can answer that, Delegate Walker. So usually if it's about value, which most of them are about, the first step is the homeowner or the borrower, I should say, would contact the lender who hires the appraisal company. And it's up to them whether or not they want to hire somebody else or whatever. That wouldn't be anything done in our commission. The complaints that we get are received about how the appraiser interacted, how they felt that they rushed through the process. They felt there was racial bias, whatever the complaint may be. That's what we investigate, but we don't get we don't involve ourselves in requesting another appraisal or anything.
All right, so to clarify this, so I get an appraisal done, and I have to pay for the appraisal to be done, the appraisal. So then if I don't agree with that one, then all of a sudden, if I want a secondary appraisal done, I've got to pay for another appraisal. So it's not as if, since there's a complaint filed, you all don't come there and say, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and take a look at this, and we can appraise it ourselves to see if this appraiser, might have had some bias in his doing. You all know, why would you? And if we don't know the number of complaints, so I think we're operating in the dark a little bit. But why it seems like the natural course of action would be, I'm going to take the time to give you a complaint about my appraisal. If it's on the value of it, it seems as if we need to have a body that can come in there and give a secondary. Even if I say I'm complaining specifically because I think it's a minority community, you don't understand it's undervalued. Sounds like you guys come in and say, we're going to look to see if it's about them undervalued or having a problem with race. But at the end of the day, I just want my appraisal done fairly. And then I have to come out of pocket for that again?
That's between the lender or the borrower and the bank, and we wouldn't get involved.
Probably they're gonna pass it. And then the last one real quick, and the appraisal, just so I can know about the process. I know Delegate Marvin Holmes know about this. The appraiser doesn't get paid if the house is appraised for $1 million or appraised for $500,000. It's a flat fee for an appraisal, right?
As far as I understand, yes. I mean, in my years in the construction and real estate business, there might be some travel or anything like that.
And with the lending company doing it, the lending company has an advantage here because they actually, they want to have the lower with debt ratio, the lower value to appraisal, then the higher the interest rate you're probably going to end up paying.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. Maybe Mr. Kasky has some insight on that.
Fair enough. I know the answer. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Walker. Next, we have Delegate Queen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kasky, that's how it there. I want to ask a few questions. I do appreciate you mentioning that there is bias in the appraisal process and has been for years. So going back to my days when I used to work for Fannie Mae, a couple of things that I noticed was always an issue in particular areas. One is just the process of appraisers are done on comps, right? And so I think, Delegate Charkoudian kind of alluded to this. And so if I'm in an area that is traditionally underpriced, that's not going to change. And I can't claim that that's some sort of irregularity because that's the process. That's the nature of the process. So you can't say that someone did something wrong in the appraisal process because the process inherently only looks at comparables. The other part of that is in some areas where you don't have a lot of turnover in your housing, you're getting comps that may be years old. So that also exacerbates the area. So until we change that process, you're going to still have this revolving issue. The other issue that I've seen in the literature is suggesting is that has been mentioned, banks have become less risk averse since the housing crisis. And so they are having lower appraisals. They want lower appraisals. And so that's another issue that's not being resolved. What are we doing to address these systemic issues we know have existed for years? Where's the change in that? Who is doing something to change that? I have not heard that yet. And somebody's planning to change this process we know is inherently flawed.
That's you addressed that question to me, but we're here, the realtors are here to support whatever efforts and provide whatever assistance we can. But to be clear, this is the different industry. The appraisal and the lending industry do operate separate from real estate licensees. So I think that your precise question is better directed to the industry, the appraisal industry, frankly. Not trying to dodge you, Delegate Queen. I'm just saying, we're here because we care and we want to help, but it's the appraisal and lender industry really that has to address these concerns.
And will the realtors support such a change?
100%, yes, ma'am.
Okay, last question we have for this panel is Mr. Steve Ernst.
Thank you, sir. Chuck, I just want to go back over. You're saying that in San Francisco, there was a real circumstance where somehow, some way, somebody appraised a house for $500,000 less than somebody else. And my assumption is that it sounds like almost collusion between the appraisal and the bank. Is that what you're alluding to?
No, I'm not, Delegate Ernst. What I'm suggesting is the scenario that I played out. And again, it was in the Post this morning. One of our colleagues sent it to me. And so I read it very briefly just as we were coming on. And I may have some of the details wrong, but what I understand is the home was put on the market. It was appraised for what the homeowners, the sellers who were African-American, did believe was a low, too low a price, well below the contract price again. The homeowners brought in a friend. They took out all, again, the personal and information and photographs and artwork that identified the current homeowners as Black homeowners. And the second appraisal was done. And again, don't quote me on the exact number, but what I recall from the article was pretty close to $500,000, the increase in value from the second appraisal once the home was, again, I'm putting air quotes on this, whitewashed. That's what I'm saying. The article, and we've heard that from different articles anecdotally. Again, these are all anecdotes, so this is not data. But yeah, that's the scenario we've seen repeated on several occasions.
Okay. It sounded to me like that somehow I understand where it could be, but this really disparages the appraisers and the profession itself by what we're alluding to here. And I just want to clear that up because I think Delegate Wilson we're just trying to figure out where we can go, what we can and can't do on something like this. I think I would agree with everybody that's reprehensible and it needs to be fixed. But again, I'd like to dig into details with the appraisals. I'd like to hear from them also. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Future.
Are there any more questions for this panel, this gentleman? Okay, now we have our last presenter, Kenneth Fagan from the Prince George's County Association of Realtors.
Good morning, Delegate Wilson. I will start with a prepared statement and then take questions. Delegate Wilson, members of the Economic Matters Committee, representatives from the real estate industry, and everyone in attendance today, good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Fagan, Secretary of the Prince George's County Association of Realtors. Thank you for inviting us into this discussion and bringing attention to and focus on the urgent policy issue of appraisal bias, with emphasis on the disproportionate effect it has on Black homeowners throughout Maryland. There's an abundance of research, historic precedents of flagrant racial appraisal bias, and even persuasive anecdotal evidence that we can all present ad nauseum if necessary to confirm that this is a blight on the housing and real estate industry. However, at the end of the day, this discussion requires more than facts, figures, graphs, and studies. It requires supplemental, multifaceted information that cannot be measured in any form. The personal, crippling financial implications it has on Black families participating in the real estate market, attempting to build generational wealth, equity, and investments as homeowners throughout our county, state, and the nation. It is imperative for us to address the impact appraisal bias has on the lives of homeowners and demonstrate that all our interests, from banks and lenders to realtors and appraisers, are all aligned and not contrary. That's why PG Carr supports the efforts President Biden, HUD Secretary Fudge, the National Association of Realtors, the National Urban League, and our state legislature, spearheaded by this committee, are taking to identify sustainable, enforceable, immediate solutions to eradicate this mendacious, racially motivated practice. Until we get to the heart of this issue as a collective, all our efforts will remain cyclical. As an overview, Prince George's County's average home value appreciation has outpaced its neighbors in Montgomery County and Northern Virginia, which is confirmation that every community throughout our county remains a solid housing investment. In fact, over the past 20 years, Prince George's home values have appreciated an average of 6% a year. We are comprised of over 4,000 realtors and are honored to play our part in making dreams of home buying and selling a reality for a broad spectrum of clients in our county, seeking to invest in or benefit from a property located in a thriving community that best suits them. As an association, we're also responsible for the professional advancement of our members. We consistently strive to equip them with the resources, tools, and education they need to succeed and provide guidance to their clients. Educating both homeowners and realtors about the appraisal process may contribute to a monumental first step towards appraisal equity. Clients are inclined to view their realtor as the arbiter, expected to directly engage in appraisal-related conflicts, like reconsiderations, challenges to low numbers, or to serve as the appropriate representative to receive filed grievances. We recognize that establishing this mutual clarity is paramount for clients to receive informed, accurate guidance and allows the realtor to maintain their integrity and conduct in compliance with the NAR's governance. To that end, PG Card received approval of our proposal submitted to the Maryland Real Estate Commission in July 2021 to provide continuing education classes to association members interested in learning about the appraisal process. We are in the planning stages of scheduling our 2022 calendar. Additionally, we anticipate using the valuable data yielded from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development's appraisal bias study in 2022, and will take advisement from information specifically related to Prince George's County. Home ownership is the key to wealth building, particularly for Black families. As realtors, we are accountable for fortifying our knowledge about how we can add value to the client's experience, including the importance of exercising hyperlocal housing market knowledge. We are focused on home ownership opportunities today, not someday. We want homeowners nationwide throughout Maryland and in our county to see growth and equity, build generational wealth and inheritance, have confidence in financial market participation, and reap the accrued benefits from their property investments. Every homeowner living in Prince George's County should be proud to call it home. Thank you, Mr. Delegate. I'll take questions now, if any.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, Mr. Fagan, thank you very much for your presentation. Crap. Can you guys hear me now? This definitely concludes our presentations for this hearing. Thank you guys for all the questions. I'm sure we have floor coming up soon. And for the committee members, just be patient and look for any notices of other hearings or meetings that we'll have. Otherwise, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.